It had crossed an ocean. Now it hung in the evening air over New Jersey, enormous and patient, its engines easing it down toward the men waiting below. For 3 days it had carried its passengers in quiet luxury above the Atlantic, a floating hotel above the waves. It had perhaps half a minute left. Hello and welcome to Vanished Hours. I'm Isla Hart. Tonight, the story of the largest aircraft ever to fly and the roughly 34 seconds, captured on film and on live radio, in which it disappeared. It is a story about ambition, about a dangerous compromise, and about the strange power of watching a tragedy happen in front of the whole world. The ship was the LZ-129 Hindenburg, a German passenger airship, a rigid zeppelin around 800 feet long, roughly the length of the great ocean liners of its day. To stand beneath it was to stand beneath something closer to a ship than an aeroplane. It moved slowly, almost gently, driven by 4 diesel engines, and it was, quite simply, the largest aircraft that had ever flown. Nothing built before or since has matched it in the air. Its scale is hard to hold in the mind. The hull was more than 40 meters across at its widest, a moving building, held aloft by an intricate cage of lightweight metal rings and girders. Inside that cage hung 16 enormous gas cells, together holding an estimated 200,000 cubic meters of lifting gas. It was among the great engineering achievements of the age, the product of decades of German experience in building rigid airships, and it looked less like a machine than like something grown. And it was built for comfort. Passengers crossed the Atlantic in paneled lounges and dining rooms, dressed for dinner, watching the sea slide by far below through long, slanting windows. There was a writing room, a promenade, even a specially designed lightweight piano made largely of aluminum. This was air travel as an event, unhurried, smooth, and astonishingly grand for its time. To buy a ticket was to step into the future. But all that grandeur rested on a quiet, dangerous compromise. To rise, the Hindenburg was filled not with safe, inert gas, but with hydrogen, light, powerful, cheap, and highly flammable. The giant that carried families across the ocean floated on the very thing that could destroy it in moments. Everyone involved knew this. The crew smoked only in a single sealed, pressurized room, sealed off behind an airlock. Matches and lighters were taken from passengers as they boarded. The question was not whether the risk existed, it was how carefully it could be managed. Its designers had wanted something safer. The gas they truly hoped to use was helium, almost as light but non-flammable, the gas that simply will not burn. The trouble was supply. At the time, the United States was effectively the world's only major source of helium, and a law passed years earlier restricted its export for fear that it might be used for military purposes. The airship's builders could not get enough of it at any price. And so Germany built its flagship of the skies to fly on hydrogen instead. For a while, it seemed to work beautifully. The Hindenburg entered service in 1936, and across that first season, crossed the Atlantic again and again, a run of flights to North America, and others down to Brazil, carrying passengers between continents on a schedule no airplane of the day could hope to keep. Its older sister ship, the Graf Zeppelin *, had already flown well over 1 million miles without losing a passenger. The record seemed to speak for itself. It became a symbol of national pride, a gleaming machine gliding over cities that came out into the streets to watch it pass overhead. People looked up at it the way earlier generations had looked up at great ships sailing into harbor. Children were lifted onto shoulders. Work stopped. It felt like the future itself drifting by, proof that the long-promised age of the airship had finally, genuinely arrived. Almost no one looking up imagined how suddenly that age was about to end. On the 6th of May, 1937, the Hindenburg approached the Naval Air Station at Lakehurst, in New Jersey, at the end of the first transatlantic crossing of its second season. The weather had been poor through the day, with thunderstorms moving across the area, and the landing had already been pushed back for hours, while the commander, Captain Max Pruss, waited for conditions to settle. The air that evening was damp, charged, and unsettled, exactly the kind of weather a hydrogen ship had every reason to distrust. Around 7 o'clock, with the storms easing, the ship was finally cleared to come in. Aboard were about 97 people, roughly 36 passengers, and around 61 crew, an unusually large crew because many were trainees learning the ship. On the ground, a team of more than 200 men waited to catch her lines and haul her gently in. The mooring lines dropped from the nose. The great ship, high-tailed and slightly heavy at the stern, hung a couple of 100 feet above the field, valving gas and shifting ballast as the crew tried to trim her level for the mast. As so often happened when the famous ship arrived, reporters and newsreel cameras had gathered at the edge of the field to record the routine arrival. Among them was a radio reporter named Herbert Morrison, recording a description for a Chicago station, calmly narrating the descent for listeners back home. He admired the great ship as it eased toward the mast, its size, its grace, its beauty in the failing light. His warm, easy commentary was about to become something that no one who heard it would ever be able to forget. Then, near the stern of the ship, there was light where there should have been none. Witnesses spoke of a small flutter of flame or a soft glow within the fabric near the top of the tail in the moments before it caught. Whatever it began as, it did not stay small. Fire appeared, and in an instant it was racing forward through the great hull. The hydrogen that had lifted the Hindenburg across an ocean now fed the fire that was tearing it apart. On the ground, the waiting crew began to scatter as burning fabric and framework came down toward them. In what is usually described as roughly 34 seconds, and that figure is an approximation, the largest aircraft ever built sank to the ground and collapsed. The tail dropped first as the rear cells burned away, and the nose reared up before the whole vast frame settled onto the field. It was over almost before anyone watching could understand what they were seeing. The ship that had calmly crossed the Atlantic was a ruin on the field in less time than it takes to read this sentence aloud. And yet, and this part matters, most of the people aboard lived. Because the burning ship settled slowly, and because it was so close to the ground, many aboard were able to leap from windows and run, or were pulled clear by the ground crew who ran back toward the wreck rather than away from it. Of the roughly 97 on board, an estimated 35 died, along with one worker on the ground, a commonly cited total of about 36. The exact figures vary between sources, and they should be held loosely, but the majority of those on board walked, jumped, ran, or were carried away from the wreck alive. In the middle of the horror, there was a great deal of survival. Herbert Morrison's voice broke as he described it. His commentary, calm only moments before, dissolved into anguish. His grief-stricken cry, "Oh, the humanity," became one of the most famous lines in the history of broadcasting. His recording was flown to Chicago and played the next day. Because cameras had also been rolling, the world did not simply read about this disaster the following morning. It watched it, and it heard a man weep through it, one of the first global catastrophes witnessed almost as it happened. What had caused it? Investigators on both sides of the Atlantic went to work almost at once. A United States Commerce Department inquiry and a parallel German commission, each picking through the twisted skeleton on the field and questioning the survivors. Both reached broadly the same conclusion. The leading explanation, then and still today, is that hydrogen leaking from somewhere in the ship was ignited, most likely by a static or atmospheric electrical discharge in those stormy, electrically charged conditions, in the moments after the wet landing lines earthed the ship to the ground. But it is only honest to be clear about the limits of what is known. The exact ignition source has never been conclusively proven, and neither has the precise point of the leak. That is the leading theory, the best explanation we have, not a closed case. Some have suggested a bracing wire snapped inside the hull and slit a gas cell. Others point to the electrical state of the ship itself. Each is a piece of the same picture, and none has ever been nailed down for cert. A second, more contested idea concerns the ship's skin. In the 1990s, a retired scientist argued that the doped fabric covering the hull was itself unusually flammable, that the coating, not the hydrogen, drove the speed of the fire. This is sometimes called the incendiary paint theory, and it is worth naming clearly as a theory. Most specialists who have examined it in detail regard it as, at most, a minor factor, and later analysis has largely challenged it. The hydrogen explanation remains primary. A third theory, deliberate sabotage, also circulated at the time, the idea that someone had destroyed the ship on purpose. It was investigated, and it is generally discounted for lack of evidence. What is certain is what the fire ended. public faith in the passenger airship did not survive that newsreel footage. The great rigid zeppelins, already enormously expensive and fragile, never recovered from being seen to burn. Within a few years, the remaining ships were retired and broken up for scrap. The Hindenburg disaster effectively closed the era of the passenger airship for good, and the future of long-distance travel passed, instead, to the aeroplane. It is strange to think how briefly the age of the airship really lasted. For a few short years, people genuinely believed the future of travel would float, silent and serene, above the clouds, in machines as grand as ocean liners. The Hindenburg was meant to be the proof of that dream, the ship that would make it ordinary. For a little while, it almost did. Instead, it became a warning about the compromises we quietly accept, the risks we carry without quite looking at them, and how fast something vast and seemingly unshakable can come apart. There is a small marker on that field now, where the ship came down, and around it only open grass. 34 seconds, a handful of breaths, and a whole way of imagining the sky was simply gone, leaving an empty field and a piece of film the world would never stop watching. Thank you for spending this time with me. History never really leaves us, it just waits to be remembered. I'm Isla Hart, and I'll see you in the next one.